If you run a small recruitment agency, you don't have time to manually sift hundreds of CVs. Smart Sifty does it for you. It screens, shortlists, and ranks candidates instantly, fairly, and consistently, so you can focus on actually placing people, not drowning in admin. Less bias, less time wasted, more placements. If you're serious about running a smarter, more efficient agency, go to smartsifty.com and book a demo today.
What great ideas are so close within your grasp? Seeing other points of view, anticipating change, considering multiple possible turnouts, acknowledging uncertainty, searching for compromise. We're going to talk about how to get over those limiters of innovation so that you can extract better thinking from yourself and your team. So let's talk about how to win the future.
This week, I'm joined by Joe Lalgee, better known as the Realest Recruiter. Joel has built one of the most recognisable personal brands in global recruitment, turning consistent content into real influence, real community, and real commercial opportunity. We dive into what a modern recruiter needs to do differently, how personal branding actively drives revenue, and why trust is now the most valuable currency in talent acquisition. Welcome back, everybody, to the Marketing Rules podcast. It is my pleasure to welcome on board Joel Lalgee. Joel, it's a bit of a coup getting you onto the podcast, right? You are the kind of recruiter's recruiter, right? Basically, you are Mr. Talent Acquisition, you are the man with the kind of the recruitment personal brand that I think every recruiter really, really wants. So I'm really happy to have you on board. That said, for those kind of like those people who have been in deepest, darkest Borneo that might not have seen any of your content, right, or haven't heard of you, maybe you could just give us a little bit of your kind of like potted history and a little bit of your background and kind of what you do now.
Yeah, absolutely. So great to be here. I'm glad we were able to figure out a schedule and time with the time difference. So for anyone who doesn't know me, I've been in recruiting for a decade. Started and remained on the agency side of the business. Spent about 5 years with the first agency I was with. They were more of like an RPO than a traditional agency. Great way to jump into the business because you didn't have to sell right out of the gate. But as you kind of progressed in that role, you got more into sales, client development, and really just consulting with clients to help them fill their position. So a lot more relational than transactional, which has helped me throughout my career. Did that for about 5 years. And then COVID hit, and I actually ended up leaving the agency that I was with. Like I made a decision to leave them, and then 2 weeks later, COVID hit. So spent a couple of years at another agency, and then actually moved into kind of coaching and training recruiters on personal branding. So I work for a company in the UK, which I'm sure some of your listeners are familiar with, Hoxo, and worked with Sean over there, really just training recruiters on how to build a personal brand on LinkedIn. Did that for about a year and a half, and then took a job at another agency in Chicago, a recruitment agency, and did that till about 2022. And in 2022, the market, at least for the sectors that we were hitting, which were mainly tech, obviously just tech completely shifted. A lot of agencies, I think, really struggled, just with client development and just with how the market was going. I recognized an opportunity at that time to really start to monetize my personal brand, which we can talk a little bit more about, like what that looks like. But I took that opportunity, and at that point, it just made sense to kind of just go solo. So I spent the last 3 years really building the Realest Recruiter social media account, which is on TikTok, YouTube, Instagram, and then my own kind of like personal brand on LinkedIn. Continued to build that. And now I'm doing executive recruiting within HR. So really just focus purely on anything that would fall under people, director level and above, focusing on those roles, and then kind of balance that with media and sponsorships and speaking as well. So I do a lot of events in the U.S. a few globally as well, but primarily like going to US events and doing speaking and hosting as well. So that is me. And then I guess on the personal side, I'm a dad, got 3 kids under 6. So, kind of starting a business, owning a business while you have young kids, I think is just anyone who's in that position will relate. I think just having kids in general is a challenge. So that is me. Hopefully that was succinct enough.
Oh, that was perfect. It's like you've done it a numerous amounts of times. Um, how did you then, just kind of talking about, how did you get into recruitment in the first place? Was it
Yeah.
a conscious decision, or did you, like nearly every other recruiter in the history of man, described it as falling into recruitment?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd assume so, right? That's kind of how it happened?
Yeah, I actually had a friend who he owns that first recruitment agency that I worked for. Um, a friend of mine owns it, and he had for years. He actually worked for Randstad for maybe close to a decade. He ran an office here locally to us, and get really really successful. And then he got headhunted away from Randstad to basically recruit for this insurance group, and then they kind of sold the business off, but they recognized a need with a lot of their clients that they needed recruitment help. So they kind of spun off a recruitment business. And he had been talking to me for years. He's like, you need to get into recruitment. You'd be good at it. You're good with people. Prior to that point, um, I don't know if there's an easy way to say this, but let's just say I spent my early to late 20s. um, just was not focused on work at all. So I went to school and graduated, did all that sort of stuff. But I was in the partying and having fun. So like for me, work was just a way to kind of fuel that. And so I do a lot of festivals. I was out every weekend. So I just really wasn't career focused. And I was actually working in banking, which is like, you show up every single day at the location, you're wearing a suit, you're trying to sell people mortgages, investments, those types of things. Um, and it wasn't until about 6 or 7 years into that field, um, I just I just couldn't take it anymore, and I was like, I need to find something else. And I reached out to this friend of mine who owned a recruitment agency. He said, "Could you get me a job?" He's like, "No, but I can get you an interview, and then you can interview and get the job." And yeah, interviewed. I think they felt like I'd be probably good with people and sales because I was doing a decent amount of that within banking. And then literally, I think at that point, it did feel like I kind of got pushed into it, or like fell into it, because it was just like, how it is. And when you start in recruitment, it's like week 1, you're an expert in whatever you recruit in, but you don't really know anything. And it's just like, pick up the phone, start calling people. Okay, this is what I do now. But it's worked out well. And I think the thing I love about recruitment as an industry is it's sort of under, I don't know, it's almost like under the radar, I think, for a lot of people. Like, I think there's a lot of confusion of even what recruiters do. But just within the field, there's so many opportunities, because you have agency, you got internal, you've got consulting. And then I think over the last 5 to 10 years, I've just seen an explosion too with like the tech scene in recruitment and HR. So there's really a lot. I think there's a lot of opportunity within the space. That being said, it's obviously just a turbulent industry, really fueled by how well the economy is doing, how much hiring is going on. So I think it really tests your resilience at times as well, which is why you find a lot of people don't necessarily last, but the people who do last are people I really look up to and just think, yeah, you can really make a career out of this.
Yeah. It's refreshing to hear that kind of sentiment about recruitment and recruiters, right? Because, we've spoken to a lot, we work with a lot. And you're right, some people don't last. And the kind of, there is this kind of perception of recruitment that it's long hours, it's quite salesy, it's a lot of picking up the phone, it's really slightly old fashioned, right? In that, um, and I think that kind of has given it this kind of bad reputation as well, right? That it's slightly like secondhand car salespeople. Now, that I know that's a pretty sweeping statement, but it is kind of refreshing to hear people just like, no, this is actually a great career, right? You can make a career out of this. You can do really well in this, and it's not just about the money. You can become influential. You can have a really successful career. You can be really happy by doing this. You can kind of be really fulfilled by doing this. But from the outside looking in, that I don't think that's always the perception, right?
Yeah.
Um, what do you think then needs to change to kind of to change that kind of perception, or is it about being more transparent? I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, I think, I will say like the UK market and the US market, there definitely differences, and I've
Yeah.
worked kind of within both. There's definitely, I think, a lot more competition in the UK when it comes to recruitment, and I think there's probably more of a mindset of, like you said, more of that like old fashioned like knocking the doors, cold calling. But even with that being said, to me, like I think no matter what field you're in, if you are not building relationships strategically to where after a few years you're not having to pick up the phone and you're not relying on referrals and relationships, um, I think you've got maybe an issue in just the business as a whole. At a certain point, like as I think cold call, like why do we cold call? Why do you do really heavy sales activity at the beginning? Because nobody knows you. And so, yeah, it's the quickest way to get out there is to just meet a bunch of people, have a bunch of conversations. But at a certain point, you should have relationships, that you kind of grow throughout the year, that you nurture, that really should kind of result in ongoing business and again, referrals. Like it's a big, big trust business.
Mhm.
But I think in terms of the overall reputation, to me, it's going to be leadership every single time. And I think um, I have seen a shift in leadership within the space. I think a lot of people, maybe with social media and social selling, there's been a resistance, but now I think AI has kind of come along and it's just forced everybody, no matter what business you're in, whether you're in recruitment or marketing or sales or any type of consultancy, whether you're big business, small business, AI has kind of forced people to rethink and just relook at how things are being done. And so I think that change is inevitable
Mhm.
and it's going to happen. But I think moving forward, within the recruitment industry, I just think it's leadership and it's just understanding that, the things that made you successful 30, 40 years ago, there's certain things that you could take away from that, which, there's obviously foundational things that don't change, but some things do change. So I think it's just having that openness to go, okay, yeah, maybe the techniques and the way that we did things 30, 40 years ago, um, aren't as relevant as they were back then. So, what's the new way to do things, or what are the ways? And I think leaders that are humble, leaders that can recognize like, yeah, change is inevitable, they're going to do well and that change is going to happen. I think people who resist it and just don't want to change, there's going to be a struggle with that as well. So I think it's that mindset and like the mindset that leaders have really.
I agree. I think that the kind of leaders that have that mindset around that recruitment is still a sales focused business, and that when you start, you have to be slamming the phones, and that's the metric that you are going to be judged by, as opposed to again, building those long-term relationships that don't happen in the first few months. Yeah, I mean, the expectation, I guess, is that someone new or someone kind of moving businesses and jobs and kind of coming into another recruitment agency or starting a recruitment agency is expected to almost hit the ground running, right? You're paying them X amount of money. You need to be making that return almost instantaneously. So you've got to be making 50 plus whatever it is calls per day. And that's the metric I guess the mindset, it's difficult to shift that mindset and say, actually, no, we're going to give you time to build these relationships, to kind of to get your feet under the table, to start talking to these businesses that might not have a need right now, but when they do, you're the only person they're going to come to.
Yeah.
That doesn't happen overnight, and I think that's possibly the problem here. Is that it's the need for a business to literally an expensive consultant comes on board and right, you need to start
Yeah.
making money, opposed to no, we're going to give you time to make those relationships.
Well, you see that too with, I do a decent amount of work with tech companies, and you see that with SDRs and the sales team or the VP of sales, where, but I think there is like an acknowledgement now that sales within itself. So not even just looking past recruitment, and obviously sales is heavily involved, particularly with agency recruiting. But sales is changing, it's shifting, and I think one of the things that I've seen AI and automation do is it makes certain activities within sales easier, mainly outreach. But the more outreach there is, the harder it is to reach people. And it's the same with social media, right? I think maybe 5 years ago when I started creating content, there wasn't as much competition. Fast forward 5 years from now, everybody wants to be an influencer. Everybody. So, um, so there's so much competition, and then you have AI on top of that, where AI makes it easy to generate content. Now, whether that content is good or not, that's a whole different question. But it's like it makes certain activities easier and makes other activities harder. And I just think, let's say you're an internal recruiter and you're using an AI agent. Great, it's amazing if you're the only person who's using the AI agent. But as soon as 100 other recruiters are using that same AI agent, then it's almost like by definition, it just makes everything harder. Like I think a huge battle nowadays is just getting someone's attention, getting them to stop, getting them to have a conversation. Building, just even having that introductory, "Hey, I'm aware of who you are." It's just getting harder and harder and harder. And so even though the actual activity of creating an email sequence or personalizing is easier, it's still it's hard to reach people. It's like even with cold calling, I think at least here in the States, I'm not against cold calling. I just personally don't answer my phone when I get a call I don't recognize. And I know from experience, a lot more people are becoming like that, where they're not picking up the phone. Why? Because not because they don't like cold calls necessarily. It's just, I get 50 calls a day from spam numbers. So then it's just like any number that doesn't have the name on it and I don't recognize, I'm just less likely to answer. So I think that's the challenge everybody's feeling, and it's like, to me now, there's just not one way to do things. There's lots of ways. And really you have to holistically go, what's our plan here? Are we going to events? Are we meeting people? Are we meeting clients? Like you mentioned, you go to London a few times a month to meet with clients in person. You need to be doing that. You need to be meeting with prospects in person. You need to be emailing. It's almost like you have to do everything, and that's a challenge. And again, to your point, it's just taking longer, because it just takes longer to build trust nowadays. Like people's trust alerts are like high because we're bombarded with so much information. It's just hard to know what's real, what's not. Is this AI? Is it an agent? Do I need this? And so it makes it a challenge. And then you couple that with, we are in a tough global market situation, which means opportunities are already harder to get. So you have a market where clearly not as many people are hiring and there's a lot of uncertainty. And now so that means there's less opportunities. It means you have more people going after less opportunity. And then the ways that people are going about it is just, I mean, I literally got pitched by an email agency that told me they could set up 7 domains for me, and then they could blast out 30,000 emails in a month. I said, that's just ridiculous. And I was like, how many responses will I get? They were like, you might get 10 out of that. I'm like, 10 out of 30,000. That is just,
Yeah.
but that's what we're going
Yeah.
against.
Yeah, it's almost sounding like you need a decent marketing plan as a recruiter, right? That's what you need. Yeah, not blowing my own trumpet here, but that's what it sounds like you need as a modern day recruiter.
You
Joel,
have to.
let's kind of rewind a little bit and kind of like we've mentioned your own personal brand, your kind of community. When was it? What was the turning point around this, when you realized that this kind of storytelling approach, this authenticity was going to be the way forward over simply just chucking jobs out there, right? What was the turning point that you realized that was the way forward as opposed to how we'd always done it? Thinking Circles is your fractional marketing department, purpose-built for the recruitment industry with deep sector experience. We consult with recruitment agencies, talent teams, and HR and rec tech companies to deliver strategic marketing leadership with tangible results. Our proven approach enables you to attract top talent, drive client growth, and build standout employer brands. As a flexible extension of your team, we offer the insight and support you need to make smarter marketing decisions without the cost or complexity of hiring in-house.
But just this whole idea that really social media is big business, and every time you scroll, you're just feeding businesses, and it's just entertainment, and it's kind of disguised as communication. It's like get the FOMO if you're not invited to a Facebook event. So I was off of all social media except for LinkedIn because I had LinkedIn Recruiter, and obviously you have to have a LinkedIn profile. And so I would, I'd do 3 hours sourcing on LinkedIn Recruiter, and then I go to the LinkedIn feed. And I started to see people just talking about this idea of if you build a personal brand, if you become recognizable, you don't have to sell as hard because people know you. And obviously as a recruiter, being in a sales position and I'd taken on a quota and it suddenly dawned in my mind, like, are you telling me that if I create this content, and they kept using the word content and I had no marketing background. So I was like, okay, so if I create this content, people can know me and then they'll reach out to me. Like this is unbelievable. Like I don't like reaching out to people. I don't like getting rejected. So people can reach out to me. That's amazing. So that was kind of like the first part of it. And then I actually tried it a few times. It didn't work. Um, and then I just got to a point where I was like, you know what, I'm just gonna, because one of the big parts of this message was like you have to be consistent with it. And so I'd go a couple days and then stop. And then in 2019, I just made a decision like, hey, I'm just gonna post every single day to LinkedIn. I'm gonna do video. I'm gonna do written posts. I'm gonna do images. I'm just gonna do it, and I'm just gonna talk about things that I think are helpful, that I'm doing in my recruitment role that I think might be helpful to people. So things like coming up with creative subject lines or like, how to use voice notes on LinkedIn, like just different creative things I was doing within my role that I thought maybe other people would help. And so that's how it started for me. And then I figured out pretty quickly, number one, I actually enjoyed creating content, which I feel like most people don't. So I was like, oh, well, I enjoy doing this. So that's an opportunity. And then I did start to just start to see, just inbound interest or just conversations were just easier to start. And, just started recognizing like, wow, like people are engaging. I'm getting to know people. I'm starting conversations. And then that really started me thinking, okay, maybe I need to get more targeted with this, or, this actually is working. Now I just need to really start kind of tailoring my content and making it resonate with the people I'm actually looking to talk to. So it was kind of a multi-phase process, and I just changed my mindset of like, this is just business development. Like this is a genuine way that you can build a business. And what I found over time is the more people who know you, like it's a very helpful thing within business. Like whether you go to a conference and people know you, whether you go to, um, you know, DM someone or email someone, if they know you, the response rates are just way, way higher within themselves. And then obviously you have people reaching out to you. So I think once I started to see it work, then I became even more of a believer. Um, and I think now over the last couple of years, more people have jumped on the bandwagon and they're
Well, I
like,
was going
yeah,
to ask about
it
that, right?
works.
And I wonder if that has had a positive or negative kind of influence, to use it the correct way. You know, with more people, like you said, wanting to be influencers, and now being able to, you can take courses in personal branding. You can just put a lot of content out there. You can be more um, kind of consistent. You can get generated content. Again, you're right, it's probably not the best, it's probably not great, but it's something.
Yeah.
Have you found that because you did it early, you're like the cream has risen to the top, right? You're there, you've kind of got a position now,
Yeah.
and you doesn't everyone else who's trying to kind of be a bit like you just isn't able to get there. Um, and is that simply because there's just so much out there now, right? And what you did at the right time, and could have been able to kind of, and now it's even harder because there's so much of it.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's pushed me within my own content. Like that just I think what would have worked 5 years ago just isn't gonna work now, and unfortunately, a lot of people who I've known over the years who started 5 years ago, like, they just didn't adapt, and the truth is, with content, with business development, with recruitment, with anything, you have to get better, and you have to understand that things are gonna change, and I heard Gary Vee say something recently, which is, like, he was just like, "You have to understand the culture, the change, and, like, the trends."
Mm.
So and I think that's what catches people up because they will start and something will work, and then when it doesn't work, they blame the algorithm instead of actually looking at themselves and going, "Okay, no, I actually just need to change what I'm doing." And I think I've been able to do that. Like, there was a time where I didn't do any video, but I started to see that video just mattered more and more and more. And so I really, really leaned in. But if you go back, on TikTok now, I was looking today, over 300,000 followers. Like, not many people can say that. Um, but also, I did 4,000 videos in a year, 8 videos a day, which is
Jesus.
just that's insane, right? But it's like after 4,000 times of doing something, you get better and you see what works and you see what don't. Hopefully, if not, that's a whole different thing.
Well, I always describe it as it's like a muscle, right? The more you work it, the stronger you're going to get, right? And so,
Exactly.
someone who's kind of I know we talk to people, and you might be in aware this that some people aren't that confident on video, and I'm picking video specifically because it is still one of those mediums that still seems to kind of get through that breakthrough, right? But yeah, you just have to work it. You'll get over your kind of, and also people don't really care if you trip over your words and there's and an R in there. It's about
That works
again
better.
authenticity, right? It's this authenticity. Yeah, exactly,
What
exactly.
what what I feel like there's a longing for right now within people, and again, this is where it's like keeping up with trends. A few years ago, when Alex Hormozy, anyone who knows Alex Hormozy, obviously, it's probably what's his face, Bartlett and Cody
Yeah.
Sanchez, like all these guys, they all hit the scene at kind of around the same time, at least with like their own personal brands, and they have very distinctive like style, right? It was like they had the same subtitles and they had this, and what happened was instead of because they also had really good messages. It's like Alex Hormozy, like right from the get go, you could just tell, okay, this guy's in a different level. He's talking about building like $100 million businesses, and like obviously has done a lot. So he had a great message, but he also started doing it in his style with like the text, and his videos were distinctive. So people looked at that style and went, "Well, this is how you do it because he's blown up using this style, and these people have. Now that's the way you do it." So then everybody else kind of goes, "Oh, well, that's what we're going to focus on then. We're going to make these videos look the same." And I see this as well with like people who blow up with, um, maybe they have a specific kind of style, or maybe they're sharing like billboards with inspirational messages, and they're like people forget that like the message in it is actually what has blown them up, not the means of how they shared the message. But people latch on to the mean and go, well, that's the playbook. Like you have to do a carousel like that, or you have to do your video in this style. And because of that, then you just get like you get a whole ocean of like very similar content.
Hmm.
But what people really want is they want authenticity and they want connection. And this is why we're seeing a big influx of like in-person events, and there's more of a desire for that, is because people are getting a little bit, digital fatigue, and they're sick of seeing the same things over and over. So I think as a content creator, this is where you have to think, okay, what is everybody doing, and how can I actually do something that's like different, that's my own, that I can own, and sometimes that it's stepping out of your comfort zone and it's just trying different things. And I think as a content creator, that's something I've leaned into. Like I haven't just gone, "Oh, I'm just going to create content every day." I've gone, how can I do this better? How could I be a better podcaster? How could I do live content? How can I do man on the street content? Like I'm trying to think outside the box. And that's a huge thing. Like Mr. Beast, who everyone knows is the biggest YouTuber, one thing that stuck out to me that he said was his goal is just to try and create something that no one has ever seen before. And I think that's kind of the mindset. Like, what are recruiters not doing
Yeah.
that I can do to be like create my own thing? Um, and I think that's really how you do it. And I think that's like again over the years, like I've had to adapt. I've had to like rebrand myself a few times to try and just do something different, but I haven't been afraid of doing that. But I think for a lot of people, they get into a rut, and it's just like working out. They're like, oh, I'm not getting the same burn that I did when I first started this exercise. Okay, well, that means that you probably need to try a different exercise. And it's the same with content. You need to try something different instead of just going, oh, the algorithm sucks. It's like, well,
You're right. You're right. I was going to compare it to like a phone battery or something. At some point, it's just not going to be at 100% on continuously. It's going to start to lose that charge, right? And so you need
exactly.
to swap things around. From my own, and as an own example, is I remember when I first started the podcast, there was a couple of podcasts that I really loved, and I literally just copied them. And those first episodes are fucking awful, right? I can't go back and listen to them because they're so bad. Because I was just trying to be, I wasn't being me. It was,
Well, what episode are you on now? What number?
we're in a 200 something now, right?
I love
So
that.
those, yeah, exactly. And that's where this whole kind of like working it like a muscle. I think I've definitely got better, and I've definitely I listen better, which is always the best thing to do if you're a podcaster, because it's about the guest, not about the host. Before I let you go, Joel, I want you to talk me through the Realest Recruiter, right? What goes on with it? How does that all work? And talk me through that.
Yeah, so the Realest Recruiter really started on TikTok, and that's like the handle that I had on TikTok. And it was actually my wife's idea. She was like, you should, this should be the brand. Like the Realest Recruiter is the brand. So the vision behind it was kind of what you talked about initially. Like the recruiter brand is not always that transparent. People feel like it's kind of that car sales mentality. People call us gatekeepers. I just noticed that generally speaking, people outside of the recruitment industry have no idea what recruiters do. There's that idea that they're looking for jobs for people, when clearly we know it's the opposite way around. Companies have a need, they can't fill it. A recruiter is going to help, right? They're going to come up with a strategy, they're going to execute that strategy, and they're going to find that talent. So the Realest Recruiter is all about being authentic and real, and just talking about things that people aren't talking about. And sometimes that can feel, I'm sure, combative towards corporate culture, towards leadership, and you definitely have a strong point of view. But as time has gone on, I found my point of view shifted, but I've always just been true to just reporting on, what's going on in the market, what's going on in the news, what do candidates need to know about, how can we do better as recruiters, and just trying to keep it as authentic and as real to myself as I can. So as I meet people, they're like, oh, you're the same guy that's making these videos. So, so that's kind of the vision behind the content. And as far as the business, the way that I've been able to monetize it, working with HR tech brands or recruiting tech brands that want to reach recruiters, working at times with companies that want to reach job seekers, and then with my own recruitment business, helps a lot with business development when I'm reaching out to people and they see, oh, I've seen your content. And then also just generating inbound leads, whether that's for speaking, training, brand deals, recruitment. So anywhere you look, if you just put the Realest Recruiter, you can find it. You can find me on TikTok, Instagram, YouTube. Got a podcast as well called Recruiting is No Joke. Similar idea with that podcast. Talk to leaders, hear about that history. How did you get into recruiting? What are we seeing in the future of recruitment? And just trying to have genuine conversations. Really, that's kind of what it's always been about. So, encourage you guys to check it out, and you can find me on LinkedIn as well. Happy to connect up as well.
I will. So as always, we will include all of your details in the show notes, Joel, so people can reach out if they can find more about you. They can follow you on LinkedIn. They can follow the Realest Recruiter. I thoroughly recommend everybody kind of goes check out your TikTok channel, because it's one of those channels that as recruiters we usually have no fucking idea how to use. So someone who's kind of in our space that's going to correct it. But Joel, for now, thank you very much, and we hope to have you on again in the future. Cheers.
Yeah, thanks, James. Thanks again. Talk soon.
Thanks for listening, and don't forget you can subscribe to the Marketing Rules podcast on Apple, Spotify, and all other major podcasting platforms. I've been your host, James Whitelock, and I hope you can join me and more amazing guests next time. The Marketing Rules podcast is a Think in Circles production.